Before we get into this video, I want to quickly tell you guys about my Patreon. It is the platform that I've been using for quite some time, and it is how I was able to do this full time. If you appreciate what I create over here, please consider supporting me over on Patreon, where I upload exclusive content that only exists on there. On Patreon, I upload a lot of personal vlogs, really just some self-reflective things about both my work life and my personal life. I've grown a lot from the conversations I've had with a lot of my Patreon members, and I am so thankful for the people that have joined me over there and supported me for years, especially the people who support me on the level of producer. You guys are so amazing. It means an awful lot to me that you guys are doing that and helping me continue to do this. You can find the link to my Patreon in the description box of this video. Anyway, let's get into today's topic. I wanted to have a conversation with you guys about a quote of mine that has recently gone viral. I said on a podcast not that long ago that I refuse to share my body with men who wouldn't politically defend it. And I have actually been very happy to see that that quote has taken off and that a lot of women, especially in this new year, are resonating with it. That makes me so very happy. And I hope that people understand that I do appreciate that people have heard what I've said, been inspired by something that I've said, and felt inspired to not just take that advice for themselves, but also to share it and promote it for other women. I think that's really amazing, really powerful. It's really the reason I do it, right? I make the content that I make with the hope that at least one person will see it. It'll change something about their life, and their life will improve for the better. However, I've seen quite a few people post my quote without giving me credit for it. And I find that to be pretty ironic. And in this video, I kind of want to explain the quote in even further detail and also point out the irony of excluding me from this quote because of, what the quote says. This was a quote that came up in a conversation that I was having on a podcast about Laverne Cox being in a relationship with a conservative man. I have adjusted to the mindset of I only share my body with men who are willing to politically defend it. I don't share my body privately with men who can't claim it publicly. And I find that a lot of times as trans women, we sometimes have to kind of go through these weird experiences and know what we want, like nowadays conservative men figure out pretty quickly what my politics are because I'm very open about my politics and I have that conversation up front because I've dated enough conservative men. I've felt the love from conservative men and then realized that I wasn't willing to sort of sit there and accept it because I knew that the other side of it was them making a very small space for me but discarding basically everyone else. You're familiar with me and you were familiar with me before this quote went viral. You probably know that I spent 6 years of my life living in Orange County where I was in a relationship with a man that wasn't quite conservative, but was the child of a cop who was a Rush Limbaugh conservative. And ultimately, our relationship ended for a myriad of reasons. But at first, he managed to fit some of my very basic requirements. So I'm going to give you guys another quote. I don't believe in sharing my body privately with a man who wouldn't claim it publicly. And that's a saying that I've cultivated like the other one over many, many years of experiences that are directly informed by what I experienced as a transgender woman. Being a transgender woman, I am a person who is deeply stigmatized in this society. There are a lot of men who have a desire for me, but recognize that the stigma that I face within our society may lead to them experiencing a loss in social capital. In other words, taking me out on a date may make them less valuable in the eyes of other people in one way or another. And so what's been a pretty common part of my intimate romantic life has been men wanting a close, intimate relationship with me that never leaves the four walls of their apartment, or more commonly, my apartment, or my dorm room at the time.
I've been very, 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 very strong on not seeing him because I didn't want to do what he wanted to do. You know, he didn't have a place. He didn't want to take me out. He just basically wanted to either come here or go get a motel room and things like that. And I am not really into that. You know, I want a guy who wants to take me out and things like that.
And one of the things that I had to come to recognize is that when I allowed these men to treat me this way, what I was doing was essentially entertaining the idea that I am this thing to be ashamed of. I was welcoming shame into my life by saying, oh, it's reasonable that this guy wants to hide me from other people. I'll never forget this date that I went on when I was in college, living in Valencia, which is pretty fucking conservative. And this guy picked me up for the date. We were supposed to go to the movies. I don't remember what movie we were supposed to watch, but we were supposed to go to the movies. And of course, he changed his mind. Instead of going to the movies, he wanted to take me to his trailer, which I didn't really even know he had, that I now understand was basically where he took all the other women to cheat on his wife. Didn't know he had a wife at the time, but I figured it out after this experience. So he had a pickup truck, and he told me to get in the back of his pickup truck and to lay on the ground so that no one could see me as we were going into his little area. And when we parked up next to the trailer, I was supposed to jump out of the trailer and really quickly run into it so that no one could see what we were doing. It was one of the most demeaning experiences I've had, believe it or not. And it was the last time that I ever entertained the idea of being in a private, secretive relationship. My standard started right there, but we didn't quite go to the political part until I had a bit more romantic experience. So I've lived in predominantly conservative communities for most of my life. I was raised evangelical Christian. My parents basically isolated me within the evangelical church. I wasn't supposed to know anything really about people outside. Of course, that didn't last for very long, especially after I got the internet. Still, I had kind of a conservative center. And with that, you accept a lot of things. One of the things that I got to see growing up is that my mother and father really did commit to a very strict, very Christian-based hierarchy that didn't exactly make sense to me once I got to understand that my mom was such a badass. My mom graduated from Harvard. She was an incredibly intelligent woman who was a military brat and the child of a teacher. In fact, my grandmother has a school that's named after her, which I think is really, really cool. And I like to mention it almost every time I can. But my mom lowered herself, really, to respect this sort of Christian patriarchy. Within the Christian church, there is this idea of God being here, man being here, woman being here, and the children being here. And this is supposed to be basically a line of command for who you're supposed to reference. Everyone beneath them is referencing God. The children are referencing the wife, who's referencing the husband, who's referencing God, right? And so what that essentially sets up is this idea that the things that men want, the things that men need, the things that men request and require are more important than anything. It creates a scenario where women are meant to be submissive, even when they shouldn't be. And that submission is seen as a good thing, right? It would actually take me quite some time to recognize that I had internalized a lot of that. And it's funny to think about this now, but when I first started making content on YouTube and I was in that relationship in Orange County, I really imagined that YouTube would be like this little thing I was doing, and he would eventually, be the provider and all this other shit, because that's what I watched happen, or at least that's what I thought I watched happen, right? It would really take me until my parents passing away to really understand just how much my mom ran that house. And do you know how I figured it out? Because my dad passed away pretty soon thereafter, she passed away. And she, even though she had mobility issues, ran the house. And in all reality, she had always ran the house. And as I looked at all of the things that she left behind, the remnants of the life that she had put aside to be with this man, I realized that she wanted so much more out of her life. And I recognized in so many ways that living in Los Angeles the way that I currently am, I'm kind of living the life that my mom really wanted to live. And I especially figured that out after I managed to get into her Kindle and read some of her Kindle stories, which I'll just say my mom and I had very similar taste. But anyway, I realized that my mom had fallen in love with a good Christian guy, and she decided to follow him. And she passed away in Arizona in the sweltering heat, living a life that I know she didn't want to live, because we talked about it, right? And by the time I really pieced that together, I'd recognized that I had kind of already pulled myself off of that path. And a huge part of that for me was recognizing that my ex, though he was not like his father, was like his father in so many ways, and still very much had relatively conservative expectations of the relationship. Basically, when I met my ex, I was sleeping on my parents' couch. I didn't have anywhere else to be, and my parents were not particularly fond of me being a transgender woman.
Now, when I came back that summer, last summer, my dad sat me down and said to me, there's a dress code, basically saying you can't wear makeup, you can't have girl clothes, and I want to see you with your wig on, da-da-da-da-da-da. And this was right when I came out to my parents. So I basically told my dad what I was doing this previous summer, where I was like leaving to Hollywood, wearing baggy clothes to cover all my girl clothes, and then taking the baggy clothes off, putting them on the bench and going on the bus. It was like I was doing all this shit. So he knew what I would have to go through. But he said, because it makes me uncomfortable, you're not going to do it. And that bothered me, because it's like, it was saying to me that me and him can't have a relationship.
So my ex came in, he had a job, and he was able to sweep me off my feet. I fell in love with him, and we moved in with each other. And for a while, my ex got to get sort of this simulation of, I think, the life that he kind of wanted. I was at home all the time. He was at work. He would come home from work. I would be there waiting for him. And that's kind of what that was, right? Like that's really how that worked. And ultimately what happened is I started to apply myself. When we first moved in with each other, I was working as a children's illustrator, and the 2 books that I had been working on were completed. And so I had to find another way to make money, and YouTube became that way because I had already kind of built up a little bit of a YouTube following. It was what was accessible to me. And so I started to make more serious YouTube videos, and those YouTube videos took off. And suddenly I started to be featured in BuzzFeed videos. And then I was even invited to give presentations at colleges and universities across the country. And I'm very, very thankful for that. Thank you. If you were ever part of that process, thank you so much for that. And I also want to thank you for putting me in a situation where I was able to see more of the world, because what I had recognized is that the isolation I experienced with my family, plus the isolation I experienced with my ex, meant that my reference point was very shallow. I was raised in a very conservative community around very conservative people who were like the only people I knew for a really long time. Then I moved to a conservative community where I was surrounded by conservative people. And when I would go out by myself, people would basically ask me where my man was and whether or not I had children. I needed to move to LA. I needed a change of scenery, and I had fully accepted that I didn't want to date a man who had even a whiff of conservatism. Because of my job, I had a lot of opportunities to work in Los Angeles. I had a lot of different companies that wanted me to work with them or work for them, and I wanted to take advantage of those opportunities, but my ex did not want me to, because it meant that I would have to go to Los Angeles. And I didn't really understand at the time, but if my ex could choose to keep me in the home forever, he really would have, right? He did not like when I left the house. He did not like when I went out and engaged with other people. He really didn't. And he, I know, felt that if I had gone and started working in LA, that would cause a rift in our relationship. And he probably was right, because it would have meant that I would have been able to see that there was a life beyond him, right? The reason I dumped him is because after I started becoming more successful, I started paying for everything. We moved to this place in City of Orange, and pretty much the entire time we were there, I paid for our rent. And I dumped him because I saw him on Twitter talking to a tattoo artist about getting a new tattoo. And I know, because he gets good tattoos, that he wanted to drop about $700 on that tattoo. So what I realized is that he had made the decision that I was not worthy of being supported. He didn't need to pay his portion of the rent, which, by the way, was about $700, right? And that he was just gonna do what he did, you know, be how he is, you know. And it really got to me, because when I looked at my life, when I looked at like what I had sacrificed, it was a lot. A lot of times when he was paying for stuff, it was really his parents paying for stuff. He wasn't really paying for it. I was paying my entire rent that was almost entirely YouTube money and speaking money, stuff that I worked for. And he was not helping at all. And he was completely comfortable watching me struggle. He really was. He would say that he was proud of me. He would say that he was happy that I had, you know, become more successful, but he never really acted like it. My experience with him was really that he didn't like that I was doing it. Even though my ex was not a conservative, he certainly had conservatism within him. And when I moved to LA, I moved here, you know, in a very cliche fashion to discover myself and all these other things. So I moved to LA, and I moved to LA with this suspicion that I was probably polyamorous, and very soon thereafter would figure out that I definitely was. And so I started to have this ever increasing list of like what I sort of required from men. I needed a guy who was comfortable going out with me, who had leftist politics, because those are the only ones I particularly care to share my body with. And I needed for him to be someone who was comfortable with ethical non-monogamy. Especially because by the time I had moved to LA, I'd been in a relationship for about a year with Nathan. Nathan is the kind of guy who, you know, he meant what he said. And when I moved to LA, I think I made the assumption that I would easily be able to signal that I wanted like a politically competent guy. And I certainly found a handful of people in the DSA, you know. I certainly dated a couple of those people, but I did find that a lot of them, even if they said that they had certain politics, still didn't quite have all of it, right? Like, I dated a lot of leftists who hadn't fully unpacked their racism, to be blunt with you. And so I would have these just really disorienting interactions with them that made me realize, like, okay, it has to be more than just that, you know? And that's when I really started to adjust to the mentality of they need to show me, not tell me, right? I have a couple of very strong stances that I try to establish pretty quickly. You know, the men that date me have to accept that I am not a capitalist. They have to accept that I am a feminist, that I do believe that women are as valuable as men. Even if I have like shades of submission in the way that I like to practice my relationships, I am still somebody who does not want to live in the shadow of a man. And I'm very happy to say at this point, I've managed to meet 3 men who are very, very good at celebrating me for the person I am and encouraging me to be the person that I am. Men who do not want to be obstacles to my own success. Men who, in fact, assist me in my own success. I kind of recognized in my last relationship that I didn't want to date a man who was comfortable watching me be uncomfortable, you know? So I date a lot of men who are eager to help, we'll just say. I guess that's my love language. But I say all this to say that my experiences as a transgender woman, especially a Black transgender woman who was raised in a predominantly conservative community, who unfortunately has dated a lot of conservative men, it is all part of that. It's all part of that quote. And I use different words. I say various different versions of this. One is I refuse to share my body. There's also I don't believe in sharing my body with a man who wouldn't politically defend it. But I've been saying it directly because of my experiences as a Black transgender woman. Now, I do say this often in the context that a lot of women are taking it. And I love the fact that they're taking it in this way because frankly, I kind of did say this for that reason. To bring this back into the conversation about Laverne Cox that we were having. And side note, if you want to know more of my feelings about Laverne Cox, you can check out that podcast. You can also check out my blog entry that I wrote about my experience with conservative men. I will link those in the comments and in the description box below. Laverne Cox was doing I believe, one-woman show where she spoke about her relationship with a conservative man, a man that she had apparently dated for 5 years. She didn't know at first that he was conservative. I found that to be quite believable. That is something that I have experienced many times, right? I date a guy for a couple of months and then he doesn't tell me until the third month that he's a Republican, right? Like that's a very common thing because a lot of Republican men know that the women that they are interested in don't want to be with Republican men, which is just another great example of why you shouldn't be with a Republican man. Sounds like they've got consent issues. But my thing was, as a person who lived around conservatives for as long as I did, I know that not all of them are like these cartoonishly evil people, right? But I think if you're choosing to be with a man who's completely comfortable with taking away a woman's right to choose, that's a statement. That's a statement. And you know, what's interesting to me about this particular quote is it's something that I, for sure, have observed being an area of dissonance for white women, especially. When I was in Orange County, I was stealth, right? So a lot of people who I knew didn't know that I was transgender, but they certainly knew that I was Black. And I would often have the experience of meeting this girl. She's really cool, but her boyfriend is really fucking racist. And what's fascinating to me about a lot of white women is they'll say something like, I don't have a racist bone in my body, while letting a racist bone them. You know what I mean? Like, come on, man. And I don't want to be crass, but like, girl, I understand that, you know, conservative men are good at putting that performance on for at least a little bit, right? But ultimately, these men don't like women. And I don't mean they're gay. I mean, these men want to subjugate women more often than not. The one thing I had to register after I was getting out of my relationship is that my ex had complicated feelings about women. You know, very, very complicated feelings about women. After I dumped him, would it surprise you if I told you that he ended up marrying a blonde white woman? And if you watch my video about, you know, what I learned about interracial relationships within the quarantine, one of the big things that happened is I found out this information. And it was kind of funny to me because he spent so much time performatively telling me that he only was attracted to women of color. He made it sound like he was completely repulsed by white women. And who knows, maybe he was telling the truth, but he still chose to marry her, right? And here's the thing, I'm fine with it. Unfortunately, in my life, I've had so many conversations with men who are married who do not like their wives, who actually hate their wives, who are willing to risk their wives' life so that they can get their dick wet for an hour. I'm not exaggerating. It's so crazy, actually. Like, in our society, we are sort of like encouraged to view marriage a certain way, but when you actually get there, sometimes it's not what you imagine. I talk about that a little bit in the video that I did about Mary Baker, who was a stay-at-home mother who decided to shave her head, and her husband did not have a good reaction to it. You can go and watch that video over here. But at the end of the day, a lot of women are putting themselves into marriages where they are not loved. And I think that it's really, 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 really important to suss out the politics of your partner before you get married. And I know that these men will lie about it. I know that these men will lie about it. I know that these men will try to hide the truth of it. But you really do have to try to figure it out. I'm only saying that in that way because, I've seen so many, mostly white women, complain about finding out that their husband voted for Trump. And it's a little interesting to me. Trumpers definitely pursue me. Let's not get it messed up. But I'm a little bit of a harder person to date for a Trumper who actually believes in the Trump stuff. Like, there's so many things that I do with the way that I live my life that are off-putting to a conservative man. And hell, I kind of do some of those things to put those men off, if I'm being frank, And at the end of the day, I just want for us to start holding ourselves to a higher standard. And as I say this, I'm going to be really honest with you guys and say that this is still something I'm working on. My partners are great. And because I'm polyamorous, there are moments where I may entertain, maybe talking to another person. I'm pretty happy, so I'm not really eager to do that necessarily. But, it's not necessarily something I've written off. I've definitely had a couple of experiences, actually quite recently, where I had to realize after the fact that this guy that's flirting with me, this guy that's pursuing me, is actually a conservative. I had this guy that used to pretend that he followed my YouTube channel, and then I realized that he didn't know that I was trans. And not that that's not possible. Like, a lot of people follow me before they figure out that I'm trans because I don't talk about it in every video. But like, this guy was walking around bragging to everyone about how attractive I was and this and that, and how, he thinks I'm so sexy and yada, yada, yada. And then also saying that he follows me on YouTube. And if you Google me, it's in the Wikipedia page. It is in the Wikipedia page. But anyway, for me, I've always thought of my partners in terms of, would this man defend me? Would this man leave me out to dry? Like I said, when I was with my ex, I was stealth. I was stealth through most of that relationship.
His father is first of all, his father is the opposite of his mom. His father is very religious, very right-wing, voted for Romney, listens to Fox News. The stereotype you think of when you think of a right-wing person, that's exactly who he is. So he knew that he would not respond all that well to his son dating a transsexual. Basically, my boyfriend says that his father isn't willing to understand what transsexuals are. He just sees it as, well, you're dating a guy. We've basically decided that we aren't going to tell them. And I'm okay with that.
His family did not know, but his family did find out. And the beginning of the end of our relationship was when his cousin found out that I was transgender and decided to come to the house in the middle of the night to accost me. It was a really upsetting experience. And he did nothing. He did nothing. He didn't step in. He didn't defend me. He just stood there and let me take it. And that's kind of when I realized that he was full of shit. And I should have realized that a lot sooner, but it took me that long. I mean, we were, I think, 4 years into our relationship at this time. Yeah, he did nothing. And it shocked me because I think for a really long time, I had assumed that he would have stood in. I assumed that he would have stepped in and done something. It turns out not so much. And it was really upsetting for me to realize that at the end of the day, it was all bullshit. And when I think about it too, it's not like he had a lot of opportunities to prove it to me. I was stealth, my race was always an issue, but my transness wasn't really. But it was such an issue that we ultimately ended up getting evicted from that place because we were staying with his cousin's boyfriend at the time. So yeah, I have not been able to just have a lot of dissonance around these relationships. And that's what informs the quote. The fact that there are so many men who are conservative, who vote against my rights, who are eager to take away access to care, who don't want for me to have the life I had, really, where I was able to transition young and to be successful at a younger age and support myself as an out trans woman. They don't want for me to be able to have that experience, but they do want to capitalize on the way that me not being able to do that makes me more accessible to them. And that's kind of the fucked up part that I think some people don't always calculate about this, that a lot of these conservative dudes who do like transgender women are really just trying to get a cheaper price. They love trans women in private, but in public, they act like they are repulsed by them and that they should never exist. It is unfortunately a very commonplace thing that a lot of trans women experience, right? Like, a lot of trans women have the experience of conservative men being interested in them. A lot of them, especially the ones who are sex workers, have the experience of conservative men being virtually obsessed with them. I'm reminded of Mark Robinson's trans porn stuff, right? So yeah, I wanted to make it clear that that quote comes from my experiences and was stated specifically because there are conservative men who love transgender women, are attracted to transgender women, desire relationships with transgender women, and don't believe that they should have the freedom to be themselves. And for that reason, I have to, as an expression of love, deny those men access to my body. Because again, I'm welcoming shame into my life if I allow a man who's ashamed of being with me to be with me. I'm not something to be ashamed of. My politics are not disposable. They're not something that can be just pushed aside. The politics that protect me should be important to the men who are with me. I think it is actually quite sadistic to give yourself to a man who's voting against your rights. And as a person who's done it more than I should have, I already know it's not worth it. I already know that, frankly, the dick is better when the guy actually gives a fuck about you. I know. It seems like an obvious thing, but sometimes, we need to say this out loud. But anyway, I just wanted to come on here and share my thoughts about this. And I want to make it clear that I love the fact that it's going viral. I love the fact that a lot of people are talking about it. I'm very appreciative to the people that have shared my name. It means a lot to me. I think the reason why it's ironic for someone not to give me credit for this quote, but then post the quote, is that the reason that they wouldn't give me credit for the quote is the same exact reason why I would make the quote. I know that there are a handful of people who are just sharing the quote because they saw it somewhere else. But I know for a fact that somewhere down the line, someone saw that I'm the one who said it and chose specifically to omit that fact. And when I really think about why someone would do that, it's not very hard for me to figure out why. And if you look at some of the most successful videos and posts that have this particular quote on it, and a lot of times it's not someone like me. I've seen a handful of Black women shout me out and mention me, but a lot of the people that I've seen who have been going viral for saying this have been white women. White women who, when I go through their profile, I quickly get the sense that they probably don't want me in their bathroom. They probably don't believe that I should have access to the things that I have access to. And ironically, that's the exact thing that I have to fight against when I'm trying to pursue relationships with men. And if you understand that quote, if it's relevant to you, if it resonates with you, it shouldn't be scary for you to mention my name. And I'll be blunt with you, to really bring this conversation full circle. I used to travel and do public speaking across the country. I used to go to colleges and universities and give presentations, but I haven't been doing that because this administration has basically made it impossible for me to do that. What that has meant for me is that I have certainly taken a cut in my income. And that is something that I'm feeling right now. I'm certainly feeling it right now. Part of why I'm changing things around here and hustling the way that I've been hustling the past couple of months is I do need to start filling some of those gaps. And when people mention me, it brings people to my page, it brings them to my work, and ultimately that allows me to keep doing this stuff. If you're someone who likes what I do and you want to continue to support it, please consider becoming a member on my YouTube or my Patreon. YouTube and Patreon are very, very different, but both of them help me quite a bit. Both of them are helping fill those gaps. And I bring that up because I don't bring it up a lot. I'm trying, but I'm bad at self-promotion. Again, I'm not a capitalist, but I do need to be better at it because it is getting tight around here. And I've got a lot of like medical things that I would really like to take care of. So if you enjoy what I post, consider supporting it. And the easiest way to support is just by mentioning my name. Mentioning my name really, really helps. It really does. Since I've seen people mention my name, I've seen people come from posts that mention my name, and people have followed me, and that is incredibly helpful. It's incredibly helpful. I'm going to be very honest with you guys. I'm talking about this particular thing right now, but I've been on the internet for a very, very long time. And for quite some time, I have been aware of the fact that there are people who take stuff from me, don't credit me for it, put it on their page as if it was their own thought. And, you know, I don't do this for the credit. That's not the main focus of mine. But I definitely think it's intentional when people choose to omit me, but want to use my words or want to use the work that I've done. It is quite standard for especially Black trans women to have cultural contributions that are then erased. And I think a lot of people who are doing this might not recognize that they are participating in the same exact thing that I'm trying to call out in this quote. One thing I'm going to say is that the men hate this quote. The men hate this quote. Every single post that I've seen, and I've seen this now in multiple languages, the men are not happy about it because a lot of these guys know that women don't want conservative men. They know that, and they don't want to shift or change or do something different. They want to just keep being themselves, being shitty, and just accepting that that's what is. So yeah, on that note, I've said what I have to say, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. I want you to always remember and to never forget that you are beautiful and you are loved. Bye.